All right. And someone else is joining us as well. So just to introduce myself again, I am Betsy Lead. I'm the Executive Director at Twin Cities Academy. And Erin, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Erin Amundsen, and I'm the principal of TCA.
Yeah. We've been with TCA. This is my 12th year. And Erin, this is your dun, dun, dun.
21.
So
I started as a teacher and
and
gradually shifted.
Yep. So we have been here quite a while, made it through the pandemic, and are still using clearly pandemic tools. So thank you for joining us virtually. It allows us to do it a little bit later so people can get home and get settled, and as we can as well. Well, tonight I have a small PowerPoint just to kind of walk through some things. So I'm going to share my screen and get started with that. And then there'll be plenty of time, I'm sure, at the end for us to discuss and answer questions if we don't cover them in the little mini presentation that I prepared. So let me start with that. Here we go. All right. So again, welcome. We're calling this curriculum night, and it's really going to be largely focused on some of the things you got at conferences, really drilling it down into the math and reading in particular, and some assessment stuff, but we can certainly go beyond that after this mini presentation. So thanks again for coming. The main purpose of this is that the reason we do this after the first conferences is we know that families get quite a few items, specifically test results, and we recognize that we get it in education, all the acronyms and all the different lingo and charts and such, but it can be rather daunting if that's not something you're regularly looking at. We look at data on a weekly, sometimes daily basis for our students. So we want to make sure that parents are partnering with us in this and that you have an opportunity to fully understand the materials you received and the test results that they show for your student. And then from that, we want to talk about the things that we're doing, and Erin in particular is leading some just remarkable things in interventions with math and reading for our students, and she will share a little bit of what's going on sort of school-wide, the things and activities we're doing during the day to make sure both kids who need support and kids who are needing more acceleration or enrichment. When we talk about interventions, we often think about support, but from our perspective and the team that she'll describe to you, we also have our gifted and talented coordinator on that team so that we can identify kids who need to be accelerated as much as kids who might need support and everyone in between. And then we know it's tough with teens to kind of engage with them. It's not like they're going to sit down for a bedtime story with you and snuggle up like they did when they were little, but we're going to do our best to provide some resources and ideas of how to continue the learning at home. And then again, at the very end, we will answer questions and we can talk more broadly about other subjects that you have questions about or suggestions for that matter. So there's my understanding is that everyone should have received at conferences 2 assessment documents. The first one that you'll see on the screen right now is what's called the NWA. It stands for Northwestern Education Association, and it is a fairly common assessment used, excuse me, K-12 in most public schools and many private schools for that matter, nationwide. So it is a national assessment, and the percentages that you're seeing are based on all the students nationwide who are taking the test. And so I just gave an example here or pulled an example of just the math portion. You did receive a paper for your student that shows both the math and the reading, but the charts and main information is the same that I want to point out. So right here, your student's name, a lot of their lingo and how they, define the different language, but I'm going to kind of even define it further for you. So what you received, we test students 2 times a year. We test them in the fall and then we test them again in the spring. For us, the measurement of growth for a student between fall and spring is the most valuable, because we know in the summertime kids some kids will backslide a little bit, and so fall to fall is not the best growth measurement to see how they really achieved in that particular school year. However, since we started NWA last year, this is a measurement. The document you received is a growth measurement, meaning how much they learned between last fall of 2022, if your student took the test with us in our school, to this fall of 2023. If your student did not take the test with us or was not enrolled with us last fall, they may not have a growth measure because they only have one test for us to gauge on. So if you're not seeing a growth or an NA is there, it's because your child didn't take the test with us last fall for some reason, whether they were not enrolled yet or came in the middle of the year or something along those lines. So this first part is the proficiency measure. And as I mentioned, this test is given nationwide. So this percentile, in this case, 24th percentile in math, indicates that student is at the 24th percentile of all the students who've taken the test in the entire United States. So not in Minnesota, not just in our school, but of all students nationwide. What we know is that just from doing some research and talking to some local folks, and I gotta move all people so I can see what I'm talking about here, is that the proficiency percentage that a student would need to be at in order to be considered grade level or proficient, according to the Minnesota state tests, which are called MCAs, is in the springtime being at 62% in reading or 72% in math. Now, if your student is not yet hitting those percentages, please remember that they took that test in the fall. We want to see those percentages in the spring. So there's still time and quite a bit of time for us to work with the student and for you to work with your student at home for them to become proficient on this. In fact, in this particular example, this student very well could become proficient because, they're already on their way to that mark at the very beginning of the school year. The part that we're looking most closely at right now, because unfortunately with the pandemic, we know that it's going to take some time for most of our students. I mean most of our students. I'm going to say 3/4 of our students are really still struggling, both in math and reading. We're seeing it starting to be a little bit better with our incoming 6th graders, but certainly our 7th, 8th, and 9th graders are really still struggling. And we believe that's because they're very foundational years we're doing during that 2-year shutdown period of the pandemic. And we recognize that, and we're doing everything in our power to get them caught up. So we're very interested in looking at what we call growth. We want to see kids, particularly kids who are still running behind in either reading and math, growing at least 1.5 years worth of learning in a year. We'd really like to see 2 years. So in this part of the measurement, it tells you where your student is in terms of their growth. So in this case, where their test score was from last year in the fall to this year in the fall, how much did they grow? In this case, the student grew a little bit over 1 year's worth of growth. The yellow indicates that they actually achieved 1 year of learning within the year. The green is 1.5 years in a year, and the blue is 2 years in a year. And it's obviously in this case, it's high average growth, meaning it's at the high end of kind of a year. So this student very likely grew about 1.25 years, maybe almost 1.5 years, if that makes any sense. So we're really wanting to see, we want to see most kids in this green and blue area. We want to see them, particularly as we try to combat the loss during the pandemic. We want these kids to be in this area, and that's what we're striving for. So that is the NWA. I'm going to just take a quick pause and see if there's any particular questions on this document because it's a lot of information. All right. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. Yep.
So I got the grade level according to MCA for the math was 72%. What was it for the reading by spring?
Yep, it's 62% for reading and 72% for math.
You say hi.
Hi.
I think that's my only question so far on that. I guess last year I asked, or maybe it wasn't even last year, but I had a different curriculum night. Yeah, tiger. I asked about like, I understand it shows me like nationwide. I was just wondering like what the numbers are for like kids at TCA, like my student in 6th grade, like how did he do with other kids at TCA his age?
I can look into that. There may be a way for us to identify that. We do have a data coordinator who is kind of taking all this background data and dumping it into a dashboard and that sort of thing. I don't have that this evening, but it's certainly something that I can get back to on, Sarah. Compared to TCA. I'm just making a note here. All right. Great. Are there any other questions before I move on? Just want to make sure this is a lot of lingo, so. All right, I'm going to move on to the next one. So then the next paper that everyone would have gotten is something called IXL. The family report for I is like lowercase I, uppercase XL. Or in this case, I guess it's all uppercase. At any rate, it is a math program. It's a computerized math skills program that we adopted a couple of years ago. I think last year was really our first year of doing it with any real fidelity, and even more so this year. It is designed to, in real time, show where students' math skills are. It's used all the time. Erin will explain to you shortly how frequently kids are participating in this software. And so the report that you received was a snapshot in time. Your student has a dashboard they can log into, and you can make them log into, and you can see where they're at today. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, how you can do that. So the report you received at conferences was kind of where they were at that point in time, and they continue to make progress. It's different than the NWA in that it's ongoing. We're doing this all year long, and it's something you can watch and track, and we can watch all year long rather than just twice a year. So this is a little bit what we call a formative assessment, or it's something that's a little bit more ongoing and helps us adjust our teaching for your students in real time. So in this case, in this particular case document, it's math, and it is focused on math. We know that math was the area where students fell behind more than in reading during the pandemic, and it is something that we are extremely dedicated to bringing kids back up to speed. And so this is part of the overall comprehensive plan we have to help kids in math. In this report, the important things to know, and I'm going to go to the next slide, but I'm going to show you how to interpret the scores. It's actually a lot easier if you try to look at the NWA numbers versus percentages. They use their own crazy psychometric brouhaha. It's easier to look at the percentages. IXL is easy. In this case, this student's overall math level is at the beginning of 7th grade. The 7 indicates the grade level, and the 2 numbers after that can mean the percentage they are through that grade level. So this child is at 7th grade, beginning of 7th grade. So 7th grade, and whoops, I went too far. 7th grade, and hasn't gone any further than right at the beginning of 7th grade, and I'll explain a little bit more. And then, if I can stop making it go forward, all of these subgroups tell you what area of math your student is performing in. So for example, the student is performing much higher than the 7th grade, actually 7th grade and 80% through 7th grade, so almost to 8th grade in algebra and algebraic thinking, but is in numeric operations is halfway through 6th grade. So, and then underneath, it also talks a little bit about the very specific things within that subgroup skills that they can work on. Multiplying decimals, exponents in this case, some fraction work. And then similarly for fractions, geometry, measurement, and data and statistics. So those are the subgroups of math that the MCAs are based on, ACTs are based on, all the big, high stakes tests are based on, and we can actually monitor where kids are in these specific subgroups, and then teachers are adjusting their instruction based on the needs of the larger group of kids. And or in some cases, if students are getting interventions, the interventionists are working directly with them on these things. So as I mentioned, IXL is only a math program. We are doing a reading program, which I'll touch on in a few minutes, but it is a very comprehensive math program. We know that students had more significant lag in math from the pandemic, which is why we're really targeting this area. It's real time. It's constantly updating as students are continuing to use it on a weekly basis. As I mentioned before, just figuring out the score, in this case, 750 means the student is working at the 7th grade level and is halfway through the learning of that 7th grade year. So 50% of the way through the 7th grade level. We are really looking for, I was talking a little bit with one of our interventionists this afternoon, but we are really, again, looking for students to make 150 points or more in a year, all students. That's 1.5 grade levels. So similarly to NWAA, we're not satisfied at this point with students making just 1 year's growth because of the lag. In most cases, we want to catch them up. And so our target is going to be for all kids to make at least 1.5 years growth. The other thing that the interventionist told me this afternoon that I just want to express to you is that all of the measurements in those subgroups go up to 1300. So basically the first year of college, right? So the 13th year. Except for measurement only goes to 700, which is 7th grade, because honestly, by the time measurement is mastered, they should be done mastering measurement by 7th grade, and we're not going to add it into algebra, geometry, trigonometry, calculus, and so forth in the upper grades. It's not that they won't see it, but mastery occurs at 700 and fractions at 800 or 8th grade. So if your child is 700 on fractions, but they're in the 10th grade, that's okay, or 800 in fractions and they're in the 10th grade, that's okay, because that's as high as the test goes for those two areas. And then I'm going to turn it over now to Erin to kind of talk through a little bit more of what we're doing for both math and reading supports and acceleration.
Hi again, everybody. I'm Erin Amundsen. I'm the principal at TCA. And yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the different things that we're doing school-wide. And like Betsy talked about, intervention, we tend to think about the students that need more support in any given area, whether, I mean, that could honestly be academics or behavior, but we also think about it as the students who need more of an accelerated something, whatever that might be, and being sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, no matter who and what they might need. And I guess the best place to start would be to talk about our student support team. We call it SST for short. We are a team that consists of myself, our Dean of Academics, Dean of Students, our SPED director. We have a social worker on the team, and then Emily Stripe, who is our 504 coordinator, but also helps out a lot with math intervention. And we meet on a weekly basis and talk about students based on the data that we're seeing for those students, whether, again, that could be academic behavior, it could be attendance, or academic information, behavior information, attendance. We're trying to do kind of a whole comprehensive view of our students to figure out if there are any particular students that might need support in any given area. We also, as a team, receive referrals from our grade level teams. So in addition to this kind of bigger picture team, every week we have grade level team meetings of teachers from 6th to 12th grade. And those teams are charged with kind of two things. One, looking at the grade as a whole and seeing if there are needs in any of those levels for kind of the whole grade level. If they're seeing patterns of things that they want to address as a grade level of teachers. And then they also talk about particular students and things that they're noticing that student might need, and again, looking for patterns amongst themselves. And there may be a student that they decide needs a little additional support in an area, and so they would write a referral to the SST team. And so we spend time every week talking about specific students. And so for example, if we receive a referral for a student, we will put together an intervention plan for that student and then communicate that to their teachers. And we also are looking at grade level information as well and seeing if, even we at that bigger level can notice patterns that we could address in a variety of different ways. Betsy, could you go back a slide, actually?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And so that's one bigger overview team that we have. And then our grade level teams of teachers. And, math and reading, like Betsy talked about, we are very focused in these two areas. And so I'll talk about each of these, categories and things that we're doing this year, just so that families are aware of the different aspects of it. Like Betsy talked about, we are using IXL in all grades of math 6 through 12. What's different this year is that we decided to have it worked on through advisory, which is something that we haven't done before. I think in general, I think it's easier in a way to talk about reading and the different things that content area teachers can do to support reading in our school. It doesn't mean that that's not possible with math, but I think it becomes a more challenging conversation to have with teams of teachers. I was a science teacher. I think that's an easier conversation than talking to English teachers or maybe our Phi Ed teachers about how they can support math. And so just thinking about it in that holistic school-wide approach, advisory is something that we have a lot of teachers invested in. All of our students have an advisor, and so it felt like a space where we could really dive into math more often and make sure that, like, even as a collective, as a TCA collective of staff, we are all on the same page of, like, math is everyone's responsibility, and in terms of like supporting our students and getting that growth that we want to see with them. And so every single week the advisors are doing IXL with students, and there are two different things that they're doing. One is very specific skill work for that individual student, and that all comes through IXL and the work that they've been doing. And then the second is kind of alternating weeks. The opposite week, the students step into what's called the diagnostic arena, and that's where they are constantly updating that diagnostic, that score that Betsy showed you, the overall math score of, I think her example was 700. That is the diagnostic score for that student, and that is constantly being updated every other week, so that it is a very snapshot every other week of how students are doing versus just twice a year. And so that is happening every week in advisory. As the second bullet there talks about students accelerate into higher level math classes as needed. That's something that we've always done, kind of on that other side, you know, of versus maybe the additional support, the challenge side of things. We do want our students to feel that the challenge they're receiving in a math class matches what they need, and so certainly accelerating them as needed. On the flip side of that, we have a number of students that need additional support in math. So we also have 2 sections of what we call a math workshop class. We have a middle school and a high school section, and that specifically is focused on students that need additional support in whatever area of math. And that's a class built into their schedule, so they have that every week, sometimes twice a week, depending on. We also, so on B days, our 5th hour is cut in kind of half. The first half is advisory, and the second half, 45 minutes, is what we call win time, what I need. And the first B day of every week, every student is in a study hall. And starting this quarter, second quarter, we started math study halls. And the parameters were built by the math team, and it's really just to identify, again, students that might need a little additional support. And so they were placed in a math study hall with a math teacher. And then we also, with the high school, we have a National Honor Society. So we've been working on getting National Honor Society high school students into these math study halls to support those teachers and those students as a tutor in that space. Miss Tripe is, well, she has many hats now. She's a Spanish teacher. She's our 504 coordinator, and she is also helping a lot this year with math intervention. So her and I work together to identify students that maybe didn't already have math support. So like they weren't a student with an IEP that had that built into their IEP. And they weren't a student who was already in math workshop. And yet we could see through the data that they still could use some support. And so we put together a list of maybe, I think it's around 30 students that she works with, either, you know, in a small group every week or one-on-one, really just depending on the level of need of that student. And so she's been doing that, and then pairing up with a middle school math teacher who is Miss Flores, to support another math study hall that's going on another B day during the week. So all of that. And then like the last piece is for 7th and 8th graders, we did adopt a new curriculum this year called Big Ideas Math, which has both a textbook component and an online component. And from what I hear, so far that's been going really well. So, you know, trying to, you know, in a small school, you know, schedules can be hard. And so we've just tried to really think about all the spaces that we could be creative and flexible and meet the needs of our students in all the areas, but specifically with math. On the other side of things with reading, you know, there's a few things there. We do continue with our middle school literacy electives. We've had those now for a handful of years, as well as grade level English classes. I would say most, if not approaching all students as they make their way through middle school. Obviously, they have an English class every year, and we really try to make sure that our students have at least one, if not two, literacy electives in their middle school time with us. Just like IXL is to math, we also have a reading program that we use and have used, I think, 3 or 4 years now, called Achieve 3000. The cool thing about Achieve is that it hones in on nonfiction reading. And so they're mostly reading current articles about any number of subjects. And it is taking place in English, but also science and social studies courses in both middle and high school. And so it's giving our students, I think they have at least 4 times a month in those 3 different content areas, sometimes maybe upwards of 6 times a month. They're reading a nonfiction article and they're doing different avid practices with it, like, you know, marking the text and doing questions before the article, questions after, and really trying to work on building those nonfiction reading skills. And then one of our deans, Sarah Ansell, she is our Dean of Academics. She is partnering with one of our middle school English teachers, and one time a week during that WIN time, that kind of study hall time, they are working with a group of students, very targeted work in reading skills, and they're doing that in a small group session one time a week. So you know, just really trying to school wide build these supports for our students to see that growth that we want and you want and they want for themselves. So
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Moving on, hopefully, there we go. So how you can help at home and partner with us. We understand it can be harder with teens, so these are just a few ideas. I was digging around in the research. There's tons and tons of stuff for the K-5 kiddos, but less so for our teens. But I think one thing to know is, and I again was talking with Emily Stripe, who also has an 8th grade student at our school, and she sits him down and makes him log in to IXL and show her the dashboard and what work he has to work on. And so all of your kids can log in at home to their IXL math program and show you what they're working on, where they're at in real time. So you can ask them to do that, or however you can get them to do that. In addition, Erin put together, and it's on our website. I'm going to see if this will link to the website, and hopefully there we go. So under student life, there is a IXL information for families link. And if you click on that, it's going to give you tons of just other ideas on how to work with IXL, how to go to your student's account, how to sign in, get their information. Again, sort of what you're looking at in terms of the levels and the scores, the diagnostics, things that they can do at home in Spanish as well there. So that is a resource if after this is all done, you want to go back to that. And now I have to get back to not that. All right, bear with me because I am not, this is technology is not my game. So let me try again here. Nope. All right, well, I'm probably going to just
Betsy, if you
unshare my
just click on, I can see on your screen, just click on the tab on the left, the curriculum night slideshow.
on the left.
Yeah, because I'm seeing the internet right now. So if you just click on the tab on the left, it says curriculum night.
Yeah, I'm seeing, okay. I've got audio recording. It's downloaded the recording. So I'm not seeing what you're seeing. My screen sharing has been paused is what I'm seeing. So I'm going to stop sharing, go back and see all of you, and I can talk through this. So some other things that that were recommended in the research I was doing for secondary students is really working on digital literacy skills. So helping students determine sort of fact from opinion on the internet. We know with all the AI and all the things that are going on, it's kind of hard to weed through that, but having those conversations about websites that end in .org or .gov or .edu, that those sites tend to be more reputable and generally more factual. Listening to podcasts or audiobooks together and discussing that just helps build knowledge and summarizing, helping them write in authentic ways, whether it be a grocery list while you're looking in the refrigerator and they're writing that down, or writing emails to thank someone, or just emails in general, incomplete sentences, and creating a resume. I know that a lot of the older kids, that's a skill you can work on with kids at home. Vocabulary building activities, games, that sort of thing. Just generally engaging in conversations about current events and helping build those critical thinking skills. And of course, always limiting phone time, as hard as that is. That's definitely something to try to do. I know that that is difficult, but both for the mental health research that we're hearing as well as just the critical thinking. So that really that's my 2 cents on ways to help at home. Just engaging kids in conversation. I think that is more than anything at this point, just as much as possible, just engaging in conversations about what's going on in the world too. And then that digital literacy, and as much as you can, any other kind of listening, speaking, reading type activities. So that is honestly, it's a little bit, it's about 7:10, so I did pretty well there so we have 20 minutes to answer other questions about other things going on in the school. I know that's specifically around reading and math, but we have a lot of other great things going on too that we're happy to share. If there's any burning questions or thoughts out there? Yep, Sarah.
So with the teacher referrals, would we know if our child's teacher referred?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes. So if a team of teachers refers a student to SST, we'll have a conversation about it. But as soon as and I mean, honestly, sometimes we kick it back to teachers and say, we'd like you to try these things for the student first. And then if we're still kind of in a space where it appears that the student might need additional support from our team, SST, then we do communicate with families and make sure that they are aware of that. Absolutely. Yep.
Also, the gifted and talented coordinators on that team too, right? The SST
Yes,
team.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep.
And you would be contacted in that case too. I mean, if we identify it's all of that, both directions.
Yep.
Hi, Beth, please.
Hello. Hopefully I'm unmuted. Hello. Thanks very much for doing this. It's very helpful. I would just love to hear you kind of talk out loud a little bit. You explained really well the supports for students who are maybe a little behind grade level, trying to catch up from the pandemic. I still feel like I'm trying to catch up from the pandemic, so I'm very sympathetic. I'm curious though about opportunities for students who are doing really well and kind of need more of a challenge. I was a little concerned that not as many AP classes seemed to be available this year as have been in the past. From talking to my son's teacher, it sounded like he's not headed into an AP chemistry next year, for example. And I'm just curious to know what those challenges are and what the opportunities are.
So I can talk a little bit about even just like I realize I didn't talk a lot about GT, but like Betsy mentioned, the process is very similar. That might not be your exact question. I will address AP in a second. But there's a referral process for GT. Alexandra House, who's one of our high school English teachers, she is our GT coordinator, and so she also sits on that team. And so it could be that a referral is made from a student. Honestly, families can also make referrals to her for their students. And then she puts together a plan for that student that, is very similar, honestly, to like an intervention plan for a student, or, I mean, honestly, like an IEP for a student. It really just is like, what does the student need to feel like A, they have the support they need, B, they have the level of challenge they need, like all of those things, whether it's a high level of challenge or maybe we need to dial it down a little bit in that moment anyway for that student. So that process is super similar. I know I'll just make an assumption. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I know we do not have AP Bio and AP Chem this year. And so I kind of assume that might be what we're talking about. So it isn't any like TCA desire to have that. It's actually because the Minnesota state standards for science are changing, and they've been, we have been, because we're a 6-12 school, we've been in the process of that change for about the last 4 years, because they started the shift in 6th grade, switching earth science to 6th grade and physical science to 8th grade. So we've been in that process. And now this year we have started the high school shift, which really means that we had to get rid of integrated science because that was our 9th grade science class. And what the state is asking starting next year for all high schools in Minnesota is that we have an earth science course, because the high school graduation requirements are still like biology, a credit in biology is required. The students can take chemistry or physics. That's still the same. But the new one is that our students need to meet certain earth science standards that are not already in one of these courses. And so their recommendation to us is that we have a course, and like an earth science course that addresses these standards. So we needed to shift what it's been for, like, honestly, I think forever, is that biology was 10th grade and chemistry was 11. And so we had to dial that all the way down. And so now 9th grade is biology, 10th grade is more chemistry, and we have to figure out how earth science is going to fit into this puzzle next year, like where we want that to fall grade wise, if that's possible. I don't know the answer to that question yet. But the reason there's no AP Bio and Chem is because we had to catch all these kids up. So, like, honestly, our biology teacher, I don't think this has ever happened in the history of our school. I don't know that it will ever happen again, but she is literally teaching one class for her entire, like, she's only teaching biology this year. And our chem teacher is teaching almost all chemistry minus one section. And because AP Chem requires 2 sections, we couldn't make the numbers work. So next year, these will be returning. We just had to make it this way this year to make the shift in science standards work as we continue to, like, roll that out. I hope that answers.
That's really helpful to have kind of a specific question. So my son is a 10th grader. So he's never had bio. So when is he supposed to do that if the state requires him to have it to graduate?
Yep. So that was also a number. So we'll have to do that like in 11th grade. So that was part of this problem, is that your son took integrated science last year. And then what I would have loved is if we could have made it work so that all of we're having to cram 9th and 10th graders into biology, and like the numbers just didn't work. So we knew we would have to have some 10th graders take chemistry and then come back to biology. So it's messier than I would love it to be. And I wish it didn't have to be that way. Unfortunately, that's just how it worked out. So he'll get it next year. Yeah. And if your student decides they want to do AP, like, I know your son, and I know that he probably would love to have that level of challenge. So we can talk about what we think you and I can talk offline about what might be best for your son, even looking at next year, because, I have some thoughts in my head right now. So if you just want to email me, we could talk about that. Okay.
We can have that flexibility.
Yes.
Multiple science classes, and a student who's designed to do multiple science classes. Well, not all of us are designed that way, but some are. So I'm sure that's what Erin's thinking.
Well, I was a science teacher, so I know, like, my biases in there, but we can figure it out.
And we do still have AP Physics, and like Erin said, we'll be bringing those AP back. And we're always trying to add more college in the schools courses, and actually, the current physics person might be eligible at some point in the future to do college of the schools, that might be something to look at. But I don't know, is that something that'll happen next year necessarily, but we're always looking at hiring staff who have the appropriate education levels to qualify for college in the schools courses, which is a master's in the content area. So there's some opportunity. It does take a little bit of time to get those established, but that is a long-term goal of TCAs, is to continue to add to the college and the schools courses as well.
Mhm.
And then Alexander House is another person to touch base with. There is very much similarly, there is a process. I mean, sometimes kids are really, really strong in one area, but that doesn't mean that they're overall in that gifted area. And so she does have kind of a checklist and rubric and some assessments. She's also been trained in identifying through an equity lens. So and I don't remember off the top of my head the name of it, but she was trained out on the East Coast for identifying students in an urban environment. Sometimes the assessment tools that have been used for gifted and talented have had some significant bias in it. And so she's kind of broken through that with the tools that she's using as well. So that's just a bigger thing as a part of our mission towards equity and culturally responsive practices. So. Other questions? And I'm gonna check the chat here because maybe there's something there. So just a question in the chat about if you weren't at conferences, those are coming out to you in the mail. We can get them to you if you email either Erin or me. We can get those out to you as well. There's lots of other great things going on. We can't fit them all in our hour, but we have, I mean, I know the AVID program, many of you are familiar with. I just heard Erin reported out to our, we call it an executive leadership team, that one of our AVID teachers is coordinating with all the other content core teachers to kind of blend what they're working on in units and AVID strategies. Those are great strategies of note taking and critically reading text and those sorts of things that are happening. The PBIS system, if maybe some of your kids, especially middle school kids, maybe heard of the Roar store, where they can get some Roar paws and go and get a treat or something for their shoes, which what are they called, Erin?
The little croc thingies that go in the Crocs. I'm not sure what they're called, but the little things that go in there.
So that's going really well. Overall, our teachers are reporting, and this is really anecdotal, that kids finally feel like they're back in school with us again. Even last year was a really hard year of helping kids build resiliency of being in a classroom and being willing to do the work and homework and take notes and those sorts of things. And we really feel like this year, knock on wood, right, that everybody's starting to feel like, okay, we do school again. And I know it's a couple years out from the pandemic, but it seemed like it took us a little bit of time to I understand I can't just get up and walk out and go get a snack whenever I feel like it. When we were all doing Zoom, you could do that, but now so it seems like we're really getting back into the swing of things, and kids are, and teachers are enjoying, most of the time being back together again in the school setting. So it feels like a much better year.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I am the worst with wait time. I'm also a chatterbox. So I am probably going to just say that you can always reach out to Erin or me or any of our deans, teachers, especially your advisory teachers are your first go-to people. But if you have, other conversations, Madison Sauer, our school counselor, of course, if you have high school students, watch for those evening opportunities for families to come in and start learning about getting ready for college applications, FAFSA, all those sorts of things are coming up. So please, we just stay in touch with us, stay engaged with us. We want to do this together and tell all your friends. So next year we can double our size of our virtual curriculum to 12 people. No, really though. I mean, we do want to continue to build out partnerships with more and more folks. So we really appreciate you taking this time, and thank you. Have a lovely evening. Enjoy this wonderful warm weather while it lasts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.